Welcome to the Love Your Inner Athlete podcast, your go-to source for all things mental fitness and sports. Whether you're an athlete, coach, parent, or professional, you will learn as you join us to dive into inspiring conversations with those who have worked to develop their mental fitness. You will hear from people who've put in the work as either an athlete, coach, parent, or professional. In each episode, we bring you discussions and expert insights on developing resilience, focus, and mindset. Discover the concepts of mental fitness and learn how to use it to create consistent, durable confidence in both sports and life. I'm your host, Hans Schulstead. Let's get started. Welcome to the Inner Athlete Podcast. I'm Hans Schulstead. Today we are here with Stephanie Esser. On the Inner Athlete Podcast, we talk all things mental fitness, and our goal is to create conversations around mental fitness, mental performance, and bring in people who've done the work. Stephanie owns a business called Balancing Elephants, and she is a breath coach. So I thought I would have her on so that the listeners could learn more about what she does. So thanks for joining us. So tell me a little bit, how did you come up with that name, Balancing Elephants?
Well, Balancing Elephants is it's basically, I like the word balancing versus balanced because I feel like regulation and self-care is ongoing. It's never really achieved. So it's a skill that's ongoing. So balancing, it's both figurative and literal, because I teach yoga as well. And elephants is just, elephants are they represent, I just think of a big elephant's foot in the ground. It's very grounding. They're curious, they're loyal, they have just an inner strength, all qualities I try to teach. So Balancing Elephants, and then the acronym B with the two letters. So
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, well, and so we will not be truncating any of your questions.
Sounds great.
Right? I don't know if you remember that about me and my puns in class.
Yes.
So tell me, what's the best piece of advice you've ever gotten, and how and when do you use it, or have you used it?
Well, I'm assuming it's in relation to what I teach and do, or well, I guess
anything. It doesn't matter.
I guess the best piece of advice, what I've learned probably more than anything from my whole journey, is that just basically we have more control over our the state of our nervous system at any given time. And we have, I think the advice to basically tap into our inner resources to do that is super powerful. And that's just has stuck with me from the beginning. It's really kind of what fuels my passion to share it with others. So by way of using the body, the breath, to regulate the nervous system.
Okay. So tell me a little bit more about how you got into what you're doing and your career path to owning your own business.
Yeah, so I'm a former school teacher. I taught fourth grade primarily. And so I just have the educator's gene. I love to share knowledge and teach in hopefully, really simple steps. And I then got into yoga as a practitioner. I really, really loved it, and then got certified to teach yoga. And then that just kind of opened up my eyes to just how the breath played a role in that experience. And I always felt like breathless, and I really struggled to breathe, to basically to control my breath while I was practicing yoga. And I stumbled across a TED Talk by Dr. Belisa Vranich, who is pretty much the expert in breathing mechanics and physiology. And after watching that TED Talk, everything changed for me. I realized that I have not been breathing well, and just my everyday breathing was off, and I was breathing shallow. That then translated into my athletics, my yoga, walking, running, you name it. So then I got certified under Dr. Belisa, and then went on to Breathing for Warriors, which is her advanced training that focuses on basically breath training for athletes. And in that process, it dawned on me that I didn't understand why I was so passionate, and why everything just kind of clicked for me. And I think it stemmed from, I was born a premature twin. and without the ability to breathe on my own. So I spent the first month of my life in an incubator. And I believe that all, kind of played a role into why I am here today and why I'm so passionate about sharing breathing. Because I had really poor breathing habits growing up, and I had a lot of anxiety around my breathing. So now that's gone because I know how to breathe in a way that keeps me calm and regulated.
Okay, so where did the interest in working with athletes come from?
Probably my Breathing for Warriors training, Dr. Belisa's advanced certification. I never realized how targeting the breathing muscles separate from your sport can be literally a game changer. It can help improve endurance. You can like not get as gassed as quickly by simply targeting those primary breathing muscles and letting them drive the energy, because oxygen is energy. When you run out of oxygen, you get gassed, and it's something that most athletes don't realize they have. That's a trainable skill, but it can really be helpful, especially for those that really struggle with like exercise-induced asthma or just get fatigued quickly.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about like the system or the I saw on your website that like you have a class that you do and you do an assessment. Tell me a little bit more about that and how that works.
Yeah, so my process is, first of all, it's very practical. It's all evidence-based, and it's measurable, which I think is the coolest part about this process. Yep. Dr. Belisa developed a functional measurement called the BIC, or the breathing IQ. And you can actually access it online. You can do it yourself if you want to see what your breathing score is. And it's graded A, B, C, D, F. Most people get, including athletes, almost especially athletes, most people get the highest score I've ever seen, like right off the bat from anybody, was a C. I myself was a D, I think, when I first took it. And so then what's really cool about it, I measure two things. Number one is location of movement. So I watch the person breathe. I see where the movement's happening in their body. And then I look at the range of motion, where I actually use like a tape measure around the lower ribs. And I measure the expansion on the inhale and the narrowing on the exhale. Sometimes that actually doesn't happen. And that's a sign that we need to work on some diaphragmatic training. And so we get a baseline. I also measure CO2 tolerance, and I do an exhale test, because your exhale muscles are a whole separate muscle group. Your diaphragm is your primary inhale muscle, but then your exhale muscles are very important to train and assess as well. So I usually do those three tests. They're all measurable. They're all goal oriented. So we set a goal. Clearly, the goal is to get an A on your breathing IQ. Based on what I see in the client, I will assign a customized, personalized plan to work on the areas that need some improvement. So,
okay. Well, that sounds awesome, actually. When I looked at that, I thought that would be something like, because one of the things that I see is I've had a lot of athletes who've done eye training, which seems to help them with nervous state regulation. But I also see how this could be a really big thing, especially because it's the most basic way to like reset your body in a performance situation. And it seems like the specialized knowledge for yourself and from you would really help with that.
Yeah, 100%. It's really new to a lot of people, and a lot of people assume that an athlete, especially like an elite athlete, is a really good breather, and that's not the case. So you have to, one thing Dr. Belisa taught me is that you have to train your breathing muscles separate from your sport. Just because you're in great cardiovascular health, it does not mean your breathing is optimal. So, and it's something that can really help not just with stamina, but also recovery, reduce injuries and pain, because your diaphragm isn't just a breathing muscle. It's a stabilizer. It helps with your center of gravity. People that aren't utilizing their diaphragm often have digestive issues, because your diaphragm sits below your heart and lungs and above all your digestive organs. And by design, it should be when you inhale, it lowers, and your ribs should wing out, filling up the lower lobes of your lungs. And in that process, it literally gives your digestive organs a visceral massage, 20, 25,000 times a day, that should be happening. But if your diaphragm is weak or stuck, which most people have weak or stuck diaphragms, 9 out of 10 people, according to Dr. Belisa, then you're not getting that.
Wow.
So if you have digestive issues, lower back pain, this would be my first step. This would be the first step I would take, because it's just how your body's designed and it's physiology. So if it's, I'm not going to guarantee that it'll solve every digestive issue, but it's a really good place to start.
Okay. Well, so can you tell me about like some changes or transformations you've seen in the athletes that you've worked with? I mean, obviously without sharing names or anything like that, but.
Yeah. 100%. So I had I think he was a 15-year-old soccer player, and his parents hired me to help him with his breathing because he got gassed on the field very quickly. He just couldn't, his stamina he didn't have the stamina to get through a match, and it was starting to affect his confidence. And so I looked at him, I assessed him, and discovered that he was primarily what I call a vertical breather. Dr. Belisa's she's coined the terms vertical breather and horizontal breather. Basically means like a vertical breather is like an upper chest breather. Use it, shallow breathing is another term, where you're only really filling up the top lobes of your lungs. And another thing that a lot of people don't realize is that your lungs actually go down. If you can access the back of behind your back, if you put your hands down on your lower back, just 4 inches above your waistline is how low your lungs go. And back there is the largest, most oxygen dense part of the lungs. And that's where we want the air to go. So somebody that's breathing shallow, using their accessory breathing muscles, they're just kind of taking sips of air, which leads to then having to breathe faster. So when we can get our diaphragm and our intercostals, our rib muscles working to their potential, we don't have to breathe as often, and we can get a really good lower breath where there's more oxygen delivery in the lower lobes of the lungs, which is going to get you through any physical challenge with way more ease, less effort. And then if you know how to breathe that way, you are able to use those slow and low breaths to recover in between bursts of energy. So it's really, there's a lot of benefits to it. But so the soccer player, this 15-year-old, I also noticed that he was primarily a mouth breather. When you are a mouth breather, you tend to not, well, first of all, by simply breathing through your nose, you're adding that resistance. So you're strengthening your diaphragm because it's harder to breathe through the nose, right? So that's just in itself helping to strengthen the diaphragm. It also helps keep the chemistry balanced, the CO2 and oxygen. When you mouth breathe, you develop a sensitivity to carbon dioxide. And a lot of people think that when they're gassed or when they're like struggling to get air, that the problem is that they don't have enough oxygen, but that's not the case. When you feel breathless, it's a buildup of carbon dioxide. And people that get breathless very easily, they have a low sensitivity or a high sensitivity, low tolerance to carbon dioxide. So people that hyperventilate, mouth breathers, it just creates kind of this vicious cycle that, so I encourage nasal breathing all the time unless you need it. If people are curious about when to breathe through your mouth when you're in high effort, shift adapt, which is I don't know if you know Brian McKenzie. He's really good with nervous system and breathing. They developed a gear system. So it's 5 gears on, you with your low effort, it's nasal, then nasal. So, and it works its way up. Right. So when you are in all out effort, open your mouth, use what you got, but then we got to get back to nasal as fast as possible to then and recover. So this 15-year-old, kind of circling back to him, he was a mouth breather. He was a vertical, very inefficient breather. We had a lot of work to do, but we did it. And I was really proud of him. He did his homework. The homework usually involves breathing exercises, not the kind of breathing exercises most people think of, like box breathing or 4-7-8. One example would be, so if somebody had a very low range of motion. So meaning that there's no, when you inhale, your ribs should, I call the ribs the wings of the diaphragm sometimes, because they literally should wing out on the inhale. And so we don't want to see the shoulders lifting. We want to see an expansive inhale. Think of 360 degrees around your body. Yeah. So a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to be a belly breather. And I kind of have a love-hate relationship with that term belly breathing, because a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to belly breathe, and that's healthy. But then they end up just kind of popping their belly out, and they're not really getting the concept of when you inhale, your whole rib cage should expand, because that's utilizing your diaphragm. And we're always breathing diaphragmatically, always. I mean, but many of us have just very weak.
So how many hours with you did it take for you to get those results?
With this 15-year-old?
Yeah.
So for him, you can, I do a 90-minute breathing assessment. I offer that, and people can literally, I have seen people go from an F to like a B after 90 minutes with me. Now, the problem is breathing is automatic. So when you're really consciously doing it, you can make it work. But the key is then to make it automatic, like to readopt those patterns. And we're all born as optimal breathers, except for people like me that obviously, but we have, and if you watch a baby breathe, a toddler breathe, your dog, they're having that nice extension. And we seem to mess it up around age 5 or 6 is what the studies show. And you think about what happens at that age. You go to school, you sit down, you start comparing yourself to other children. You might be squeezing your belly in. Some of the most common enemies of a healthy breath are posture, right? If you're slouched, forward head posture, you're basically cutting off that path of the diaphragm. Tension is another one. So bracing your belly. People that hold tension in their shoulders and their neck so a tense body will not breathe well, period. So we have to, so that's one of the things I help people learn, is how to release that tension, because a lot of people don't realize they are holding tension.
Well, so would you say that you've seen like people with a trauma history have the trauma interfere with that?
Yes. Yeah. A very common like breathing pattern that is a result of like it could be just one trauma, it could be multiple, but is like breath holding, or a paradoxical breather, which is a reverse breather where when they inhale, their belly goes in. So if that's something that your listeners can maybe try right now, they can, take a large inhale and then exhale, and just breathe naturally and notice how your body is moving. Is your belly moving when you take a deep inhale? Is your belly moving out, or is it away from your spine, or is it moving in towards your spine? Or maybe there's no movement at all. So I always start with that awareness piece. I also, ask, okay, where do you feel like you get a little taller on the inhale and relax back down on the exhale? Or feel very little movement happening. Some people just are, their breaths are so minimal that there's not much movement at all. So these are all just clues. And somebody that has a trauma, I've seen a lot where they are that reverse breather. Because when you think about when you get startled or scared, when you gasp, right? What happens? You take a big audible inhale through your mouth, your shoulders rise, your belly goes in. And you can get stuck in that breathing pattern in very little time, as little as a day. And so these are all just clues. And so, but when you are a reverse breather or a paradoxical breather where your belly moves in and your chest lifts on the inhale, you're basically stuck in a fight or flight all the time, because the way you breathe communicates to the brain whether you're safe or you need protection. So it's your autonomic nervous system, right?
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
Exactly. Yep. So people with trauma, people with just chronic anxiety or stress and anxiety, the breathing, how you're breathing is either fueling that stress or it's And so that's one of I think the power or the overall benefits of just learning how to breathe. You can breathe your way to feel safe. And I think that's super powerful. And I don't think I quite answered your question about the timeline with the 15-year-old. So you can see results in as little as one session. But for him, I think it took about 4 weeks to really see those scores improve. And he did end up with an A on his BIC. So I was super proud of him. And he's hopefully a nose breather.
So I have a question, like, how is this all interrelated? Like, I have a lot of clients who do, or that I have them do heart math, heart rate variability breathing. Are you familiar with their technology?
I've heard of it. I've not used it, but I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So how does this interrelate to all of that? Like, I have some of them who really struggle at the higher levels of difficulty to stay consistent. Would your breathing coaching help with that?
Yeah, 100%. So that's one of the benefits of learning using the diaphragm and learning how to breathe to basically regulate your nervous system. HRV is adaptability, being able to go from here to here. And there's a ton of research on what is called coherence breathing or resonance breathing, where that's breathing at a rate of like 5 to 6 breaths per minute. That's great. But if you're breathing at a rate of 5 to 6 breaths per minute, but you're breathing using your accessory breathing muscles, or you're perhaps breathing through your mouth, you're not going to elicit that same outcome that you're shooting for. So step one is to get the breathing mechanics dialed in. Get your breathing mechanics optimal so that when you do those resonance, you're actually going to get the outcome that you're looking for.
Okay, that makes sense. So you, like, typically the amount of time that someone spends with you from beginning to end is somewhere between like 1 and like 10 hours or 1 and like 6?
Basically new neural pathways, right? It's muscle memory, just like you're lifting weights, right? It takes time to build that muscle memory. So you can learn it in as little as 90 minutes with me. And if you're self-motivated and willing to, I give you the tools to go off and do it on your own, remeasure yourself. I teach you how to do the tests on yourself. But if you're somebody that really likes to have more guidance, or if some of my clients have just really like a paradoxical breathing pattern, is really hard that takes a little bit more time because you're basically having to flip-flop your breathing pattern.
So you were answering that. So you were saying that you could do it on your own, but so in general, typically though, you're talking about if you're or if you want further guidance, it could be more.
It could be more. And it's really something that when you are practicing it intentionally, you have to do it intentionally right away. So with the breathing mechanics, I really work with the body. So there's one breathing exercise, or it's more of an exercise. So let's say I'm noticing the range of motion. There's not a lot of rib movement happening on the inhale, right? So I might say, okay, we're going to work on spinal mobility. We're going to work on intercostal strengthening. So the intercostals are the muscles in between your ribs. And so there's an exercise where we work on opening up those side ribs and doing some twisting. So yoga-based movement, but really with a targeted purpose. And it's like almost like I'm a personal trainer for your breathing muscles, because we strengthen them, we add flexibility so that then you're helping out the diaphragm, because if the intercostals are tight, you're that cage that you think of your ribs of like a cage, and that if that cage is rigid, it's not doing you any favors. So we got to get that to loosen up. So to answer your question, the time is really, it depends upon the person and the body. And because we're having to, strengthen and add flexibility, if they do their exercises, usually the exercise protocol is about 10 minutes a day. But then also throughout the day, having that breath awareness and stopping and just doing some low and slow, deep diaphragmatic breaths to, again, build that muscle memory. And some people can do it and literally go in a matter of 2 weeks, and go from an F to now the CO2 tolerance will take a little bit more, the chemistry, and it just takes a little bit longer. But fixing the mechanics is usually where I start. And that's
Okay.
people see results quickly. And it's life-changing, honestly, because if you've ever not felt like you could get a deep breath, like that literally was me growing up, and then you take one and you feel one, it's like, oh my gosh, it's kind of like a game changer. So I think it's something everybody should be able to experience if they haven't.
Okay. So how long have you been doing the breath coaching?
I got my first certification in 2020, so 5 years.
So like, does that mean then that like, so do you do the in-person assessment, or how do you go about doing that? Like, is it an online thing?
I do both. I obviously would prefer in person, but it's totally doable online, and it's actually obviously on Zoom, but it works just fine. I've had clients all around the world. So that's part of the reason why I do a lot of online work, because this is kind of a new thing. And there are just people that have found me online. But I am planning I'm going to be doing a live workshop in person, hopefully in early 2026. That I've not done a big group workshop like that before, but I think it would be a really good class with the group. It's a little bit tricky.
Okay.
The assessments are individual, but I would have everybody do their own assessment.
Oh, like do it online? Well, so can you give like the listeners a quick, simple exercise they can do to like reset their breathing?
Yeah, 100%. So I'll set you up with my stop and bop method, which is a simple, like 2-step method that I teach to, because stop is basically stopping, because we breathe automatically without thinking about it, right? That's part of the problem why we develop these habits, because we are unaware of the habits we've picked up. So stop and bop. Bop stands for breathe on purpose. So we're going to stop and we're going to breathe on purpose. The step one is, when in the stop part, I get the body ready for a healthy breath, because we're going to take away those enemies we talked about, tension, posture, right? So I say stop. All right, let's sit up tall but relaxed. Okay, we want to be tall, chin back, ears over shoulders. And now we want to relax our shoulders away from our ears. And sometimes it takes, almost like stiffening them up to then relax them back down, if you're somebody that holds a lot of tension there. And then soften your belly. You can tap your belly. And if you want to hold your belly as you're breathing, you can, or just keep your hands on your lap. I invite you to close your eyes if that feels good. And we're going to take an inhale and imagine the filling into your belly and expanding like a balloon. And then we're going to exhale. And so I'm going to do a 4-count inhale, and we're going to do a 4-count exhale, just a really good balancing breath. And let's do 4 rounds together. So sit up tall, relax your shoulders, soften your belly. We're going to inhale through the nose for 1, 2, 3, 4. Now exhale and deflate that balloon for 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, shoulders relaxed. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale through the nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. And exhale, 4, 3, 2, 1. Last round. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. And exhale, 4, 3, 2, 1. You can relax and return to your natural breath. Open your eyes if they were closed. And yeah, that was just 4 simple breaths. You can do that longer. What we did is we focused on keeping tension out of our shoulders, our neck, our back, softening your belly. People that brace their belly, athletes, are probably the number one violators of this. Is they're strong, so they tense up their muscles, and that is going to inhibit that really good lower body breath. So just by simply taking those brief moments throughout the day to tune into your breath, because we get very distracted, right, in our this busy, noisy world. And that's making us more and more disconnected with just ourselves. And so just taking that time can really help and make a difference in and rebuilding those functional and calming breathing habits. And how you breathe is how you feel. So if you don't like how you're feeling, change your breath, and that would be a great go-to. And whenever you inhale, so inhaling is going to be upregulating, right? When you inhale, it actually speeds up your heart a little bit. And when you exhale, the opposite happens. So when you think about any breathing protocols or exercises where you have like an inhale driven breath where you're like sniffing is really good and it's upregulating. Like if you want to get some energy, sniffing fast sniffs and then just exhaling like kind of a quick exhale, that's going to be upregulating. What we just did is a balancing breath because we inhaled for the same amount of time as we exhaled. So that's going to elicit more of a balancing effect on the nervous system. And then a calm or relaxing breath is going to focus on a slow, low, using the diet, like filling up your lower lobes and then lengthening the exhale.
Okay.
Yeah. So really, that's kind of the formula for how different, because there's so many different breathing exercises out there and the different counts. It's like the 4-7-8 breath. There's the 4-4-4, 3-3-3. So just understanding that formula, and then the breath holds add another element, a layer as well. And short breath holds are really powerful for, down regulating, and longer breath holds are going to be a little stressful on the nervous system.
Okay. Well, and you have a whole program for athletes, right? That you do?
Yeah.
You're the breathing warrior. And then do you also, so you talked about like meeting with group, like would you say a good portion of your clients are athletes?
I have a couple of different programs. After the Speakers Academy that we did together, I've done a lot of speaking. I do a lot of speaking at like youth mental health conferences. So educating parents, teachers, therapists, mental health professionals in how to incorporate these practices with children. And so I'm really passionate about everybody. My goal is for kids to know how to breathe, to feel calm and safe. And however I get there, but you also have to find what motivates them. If it's an athlete, hey, you want to learn how to breathe so that you can go longer, less effort, and recover faster and have less injuries. Whereas maybe it's a teenager, hey, do you want to learn how to breathe before you give a speech in class? Maybe you're somebody that has a hard time getting in front of a group. Like I can show you how to get in control of your nervous system by just breathing differently. And that starts with breathing optimally using your diaphragm.
Okay. Well, this is great. I don't know that I really followed many of the questions I wrote for you. I mean, essentially we did, but I learned a lot. I actually had a lot of thoughts. Like one thought is I often talk about how mental fitness is simple but not easy. And that seems to apply to this. Right. And just like the core fundamentals of what you're talking about, like your breathing is probably a filter or a mental model for your body. And if you can learn how to breathe better, that mental model will change. So I appreciate you taking the time. Is there anything else before we leave, like outside the podcast, that you'd like to share with listeners?
Well, I think that just really the biggest thing is we have way more control over how we feel than we realize. And by simply using the body versus the mind, you talked about mental toughness, and it's hard to control the mind with the mind, because if your mind is in a words aren't going to work. So if you've ever had somebody say, "Oh, just calm down," or "just breathe," it doesn't work, right? Because your prefrontal cortex is offline and your amygdala is turned on. So the breath is like the back door, or sometimes I call it the remote control to the nervous system, because it is a body first approach. And you can calm your body by using your breath when you're in that state. And I think that's super empowering to learn young and early in life. And most adults could have really benefited. I would have loved to have learned this stuff when I was young and used it to get through the tough times. But better late than never. And once you learn it, you'll never unlearn it. That's the coolest part. Yeah, you might readopt those habits again, those poor habits, but you'll always know what, kind of like with the diet, like what you should eat, but doesn't mean you're always going to do it.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, thanks again for coming on. Just a fascinating discussion and got me thinking about a lot of different things in the work that I do and just how complementary what you're doing is to what.
What you're doing, that it's so important and so needed, and you're probably helping a lot of young athletes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you.